San Francisco, California, September 12, 1967. 7:30 in the evening. The second floor of James Y. Lee's Junfan Kung Fu Institute on Broadway Street holds an unusual silence. Outside, the first hints of autumn chill drift through the narrow windows, carrying with them the distant sounds of Chinatown evening traffic. 43 people sit on folding metal chairs arranged in precise rows across the polished hardwood floor. Their breath creates small clouds in the unheated space. Most wear simple street clothes, a few sports, traditional Chinese garments. All of them wait. The demographic is unusual for a martial arts demonstration in 1967 America. Chinese immigrants sit beside curious Americans, elderly practitioners next to college students, traditional kung fu masters, besides karate instructors who have driven up from Los Angeles specifically for this evening. Word has traveled through carefully maintained networks, the kind that exist in immigrant communities where reputation matters more than advertising, where invitations are extended through whispered conversations rather than printed announcements. Bruce Lee stands near the far wall, 27 years old, wearing simple black cotton pants and a white t-shirt. His posture is relaxed, but attentive, like someone waiting for a delayed appointment, rather than preparing for what many in the room expect to be a career-defining encounter. He occasionally exchanges quiet words with James Lee, his friend and business partner, but his eyes remain focused on the entrance at the opposite end of the room. The man they are waiting for represents everything Bruce has spent the past 4 years challenging. Wong Man arrived in San Francisco 18 months ago from Hong Kong, carrying credentials that command automatic respect in traditional Chinese martial arts circles. Trained in Northern Shaolin, Xingyiquan, and several other classical systems, he represents orthodox Chinese Kung Fu in its most refined form. At 26, he is already recognized as a master by practitioners who have spent decades perfecting techniques passed down through generations of careful instruction. The invitation for this evening came through intermediaries. Not a formal challenge, but something that has grown out of mounting tension within San Francisco's Chinese martial arts community. Bruce Lee's approach to Kung Fu has been generating controversy since he arrived from Seattle. He teaches non-Chinese students, modifies traditional techniques, and questions fundamental assumptions about combat effectiveness that have remained unexamined for centuries. Some view this as evolution. Others see it as disrespect bordering on betrayal. Wong Man has never publicly criticized Bruce Lee. He represents a more subtle form of opposition, the kind that emerges from philosophical disagreement rather than personal animosity. His mere presence in San Francisco serves as a reminder that traditional Kung Fu has produced masters capable of extraordinary skill through methods that have remained unchanged for generations. When pressed by other traditional practitioners to address what they see as Bruce Lee's departures from authentic Chinese martial arts, Wong's response has been consistent. True Kung Fu speaks for itself. The gathering tonight emerged from weeks of careful negotiation between representatives of both men. Not quite a formal challenge, not quite a friendly demonstration. Something in between, designed to allow both practitioners to display their understanding of martial arts without the complications that would arise from an openly declared contest. The witnesses present have been selected carefully. Respected members of the Chinese martial arts community, who can provide credible testimony about whatever occurs, balanced by neutral observers who have no investment in either approach. James Lee checks his watch. Wong Man is 12 minutes late, which is unusual for someone known for punctuality. Several people in the audience shift in their seats. Quiet conversations begin to emerge from the enforced silence that has dominated the room since 7:15. Bruce continues waiting without visible impatience. Those who know him well recognize this as characteristic. He has learned to conserve emotional energy for moments when it will be useful. The nervousness that might be expected before such an encounter is absent, replaced by something that resembles curiosity more than anticipation. He has spent months hearing about Wong Man's abilities from other practitioners. Tonight will provide direct evidence rather than second-hand reports. At 7:42, footsteps echo from the stairwell. Wong Man enters, accompanied by two senior practitioners from his school. He wears traditional Chinese clothing, black cotton pants, a white silk shirt, soft-soled shoes that make no sound against the hardwood floor. His movement is precise, controlled, and economical. Every step appears deliberate rather than casual. The contrast between the two men becomes immediately apparent to everyone present. Wong Man carries himself with the formal dignity that traditional Chinese martial arts cultivate deliberately. His bearing suggests years of training designed not just to develop fighting ability, but to embody cultural values of restraint, respect, and philosophical depth. Bruce Lee's casualness might be mistaken for a lack of preparation by someone unfamiliar with his background, but the practitioners in the room recognize it as a different kind of confidence entirely. Wong approaches Bruce, offers a slight bow that is precisely calibrated to acknowledge equality rather than superiority or deference. Bruce returns the gesture with the same degree of formality. They exchange brief greetings in Cantonese. Their tone is polite, neutral, and professional. No warmth, but no hostility either. James Lee steps forward to address the group. He explains that this evening's demonstration has been arranged to allow both practitioners to share their understanding of martial arts with the community. No formal competition, no declared winner or loser. Simply an opportunity for two skilled practitioners to display their approaches and allow those present to observe and learn. This framing satisfies no one completely. Everyone in the room understands that reputation and philosophy are at stake, regardless of how the encounter is officially described. The traditional practitioners want to see Wong Man validate orthodox kung fu methods. Bruce Lee's supporters want to see him demonstrate the effectiveness of his evolving approach. The neutral observers want to witness something significant enough to justify their evening's investment. Wong Man requests a few minutes to prepare. He moves to a clear area of the floor and begins a brief warm-up routine. His movements flow with the kind of precision that emerges from thousands of repetitions of classical forms. Each gesture connects seamlessly to the next, creating patterns that appear almost mathematical in their exactness. Several people in the audience nod appreciatively. This is traditional kung fu demonstrated at a very high level. Bruce watches with the attention of someone analyzing rather than admiring. He has spent years studying different martial arts systems, not to copy them, but to understand their underlying principles. What he sees in Wong's preparation confirms what he has heard about the man's technical ability. Traditional kung fu methods have clearly produced exceptional skill in this practitioner. When Wong completes his preparation, Bruce takes his turn. His warm-up appears almost anticlimactic by comparison. Basic stretching, a few simple movements to test range of motion, and some light shadow boxing that bears no resemblance to classical forms. To observers familiar with traditional martial arts protocols, it seems inadequate, almost disrespectful. The lack of formal structure appears to diminish the significance of the occasion. James Lee asks both men to explain their approaches before beginning any physical demonstration. Wong Man speaks first, in English that is accented but clear. He describes traditional kung fu as a complete system that addresses not just fighting ability, but character development, physical health, and spiritual growth. Techniques have been refined over centuries, tested by countless practitioners, proven and effective through generations of application. Changes should be made carefully, with a deep understanding of why traditional methods exist. Bruce follows with his own explanation. He acknowledges the value of traditional training, but argues that martial arts must continue evolving to remain effective. Techniques should be evaluated based on their practical application in real combat situations. Methods that work should be preserved and developed. Those that do not should be modified or discarded. Tradition deserves respect, but not blind adherence. The philosophical divide is now explicit. Everyone present understands that they are witnessing a debate between preservation and innovation, between respect for established wisdom and confidence in individual analysis. The physical demonstration that follows will serve as evidence for arguments that extend far beyond the capabilities of two individual practitioners. Wong Jack Man assumes a classical fighting stance. His positioning is textbook perfect, reflecting years of training designed to provide maximum stability, optimal angles for both attack and defense, and readiness to transition into any of dozens of traditional techniques. His hands are positioned precisely, his weight distribution calculated to provide the strongest possible foundation for whatever movements might follow. Bruce takes a position that appears almost casual by comparison. His stance is higher, more mobile, less committed to any particular direction. To traditional practitioners, it looks unfinished, lacking the formal structure that serious martial arts require. To those familiar with Bruce's developing philosophy, it represents freedom to adapt to whatever circumstances might emerge. For nearly 3 minutes, both men remain essentially motionless. They circle slowly, each testing the other's reactions to subtle changes in distance and angle. Wong maintains his classical form throughout. Bruce's positioning shifts constantly, never quite settling into any recognizable pattern. The audience grows restless. This is not the dramatic encounter they expected. Wong makes the first definitive movement, a straight punch delivered with textbook technique. The form is excellent, the speed impressive, the targeting precise. It should work. By every measure that traditional kung fu uses to evaluate effectiveness, it represents properly applied martial arts knowledge. Bruce is not where the punch is expected to find him. His movement offline is minimal, efficient, and almost disappointing in its simplicity. No dramatic evasion, no spectacular counterattack, just a slight shift that makes Wong's technique miss by inches rather than feet. Before Wong can recover his balance from the committed attack, Bruce is already repositioning, not to counterattack immediately, but to control the distance and angle between them. Wong adjusts, attempts a follow-up technique designed to flow from the missed punch into a grappling move that should neutralize Bruce's positional advantage. Again, the traditional approach is technically sound, properly executed according to classical principles. Again, it fails to achieve its intended result, not through any flaw in Wong's execution, but because Bruce's response does not match the assumptions upon which traditional techniques are based. What follows is not a fight in any conventional sense. Wong continues attempting to apply traditional kung fu methods. Each technique is performed with skill and commitment. Each fails to achieve its intended effect, not dramatically, but simply, quietly, in ways that leave Wong slightly off balance, slightly out of position, always reacting to circumstances he did not anticipate, rather than implementing strategies he has planned. Bruce does not dominate the encounter through superior force or speed. His advantage emerges from what appears to be a more accurate understanding of distance, timing, and the psychology of combat. While Wong attempts to apply predetermined techniques to fluid situations, Bruce adapts continuously, responding to what actually happens rather than what traditional training suggests should happen. The decisive moment, when it comes, is almost anticlimactic. Wong commits to a more aggressive attack, a combination designed to overwhelm Bruce through sheer volume of technique. It represents everything traditional kung fu does well: complex coordination, years of practice, and techniques that have been proven effective through generations of application. Bruce's response is so simple that several people in the audience miss it entirely. A single movement that redirects Wong's attack while simultaneously putting Bruce in a position where he can strike Wong's exposed ribs with his open palm. Not a devastating blow, not an attempt to cause injury, just a clear demonstration that Wong is vulnerable, that his traditional approach has created an opening that Bruce can exploit at will. The contact lasts less than a second. Bruce immediately steps back, returns to his casual stance, and makes it clear that the demonstration is over. Wong straightens slowly, acknowledges what has happened with a slight nod, but says nothing. The silence that follows is profound. 43 people have just witnessed something that challenges fundamental assumptions about martial arts effectiveness. Traditional kung fu, demonstrated by a clearly skilled practitioner, has been neutralized by an approach that appears to violate everything they have been taught about proper technique, formal structure, and respect for established methods. Several of the traditional practitioners in the audience appear genuinely shaken. What they have seen contradicts not just their expectations about this particular encounter, but their understanding of how martial arts work. Wong Jackman's techniques were flawless according to classical standards. His execution was precise, his commitment total, his understanding of traditional principles evident. Yet none of it mattered in the face of Bruce's unconventional approach. Others in the room are equally disturbed, but for different reasons. They came expecting to see traditional kung fu validated, to watch Wong Jackman demonstrate that orthodox methods, properly applied, remain superior to Bruce Lee's experimental modifications. Instead, they have witnessed what appears to be evidence that traditional training, regardless of how skillfully it is executed, may be inadequate for actual combat applications. Wong Jackman leaves quickly after the encounter, accompanied by his supporters. No formal statements, no explanations, no attempt to rationalize what occurred. Those who know him well understand this as consistent with his character. He is not someone who makes excuses or seeks to minimize defeat through verbal maneuvering. What happened, happened. Analysis can wait for a more private setting. Bruce remains for another hour, answering questions from those who choose to stay. His explanations are measured, technical, and focused on principles rather than personalities. He emphasizes that what they witnessed was not a validation of his approach over traditional methods, but a demonstration of how different philosophical assumptions lead to different practical results. Traditional kung fu has value, but it must be evaluated honestly, rather than accepted uncritically. Some in the audience are convinced. Others remain skeptical. A few are openly hostile, arguing that one brief encounter cannot invalidate centuries of proven methods. The debate continues long after Bruce leaves, extending into heated discussions in Chinatown restaurants and private homes throughout the following weeks. Word of the encounter spreads through martial arts communities across the United States, but the details become increasingly distorted with each retelling. Some versions describe a brutal fight lasting 20 minutes. Others claim Wong Jackman was seriously enough to require hospitalization. A few insist the whole event was staged, arranged to promote Bruce Lee's reputation at Wong's expense. Official records of the encounter do not exist. No formal challenge was issued, no winner was declared, and no written account was prepared for posterity. The only evidence consists of the memories of those who witnessed it, and those memories have proven surprisingly unreliable when compared to each other years later. Wong Jackman never spoke publicly about what occurred that evening. He continued teaching traditional kung fu in San Francisco until he died in 2005, maintaining the same commitment to orthodox methods that he displayed before the encounter with Bruce Lee. Students who asked about the events of September 12, 1967, received polite refusals to discuss the matter. Whether this silence reflected shame, philosophical disagreement with public analysis of private events, or simply a personal preference for maintaining dignity through discretion remains unknown. Bruce Lee's interpretation of the encounter evolved. In interviews during the early 1970s, he described it as confirmation that traditional martial arts training needed significant modification to remain relevant in modern combat situations. By the time of his death in 1973, he had developed these ideas into a comprehensive philosophy that challenged not just specific techniques, but fundamental assumptions about how martial arts should be taught, learned, and applied. The encounter raises questions that extend beyond the capabilities of two individual practitioners. If traditional methods, properly applied by skilled practitioners, can be neutralized by approaches that violate conventional wisdom, what does this suggest about the relationship between tradition and effectiveness? Should martial arts techniques be preserved because they represent cultural heritage, or should they be modified based on practical testing regardless of their historical significance? Different observers drew different conclusions from what they witnessed. Traditional practitioners argued that Wong Jack Man was simply having an off night, that one encounter could not invalidate methods proven effective over centuries. Bruce Lee's supporters claimed the demonstration provided clear evidence that innovation and adaptation produce superior results compared to rigid adherence to established patterns. Perhaps the most significant aspect of the encounter was not what it proved, but what it revealed about the assumptions different people bring to evaluating martial arts effectiveness. Those committed to traditional methods saw technical flaws in Wong's performance that could be corrected through additional training. Those skeptical of orthodox approaches saw systemic problems that required fundamental philosophical changes. The truth probably lies somewhere between these interpretations. Traditional kung fu methods have clearly produced practitioners capable of extraordinary skill. Bruce Lee's modifications have also demonstrated practical advantages in certain applications. What the encounter revealed was not the superiority of one approach over another, but the complexity of evaluating martial arts systems that emerge from different philosophical foundations and serve different purposes. The witnesses to that evening in 1967 are now mostly deceased. Those who remain offer accounts that vary significantly in detail and interpretation. Some remember Bruce as dominant throughout the encounter. Others recall a more even exchange that could have concluded differently under slightly altered circumstances. A few insist the whole event has been exaggerated beyond recognition, that what actually occurred was a brief, inconclusive exchange that proved nothing definitive about either approach. What remains consistent across all accounts is the sense that something significant happened that evening, something that challenged comfortable assumptions and forced people to reconsider beliefs they had previously accepted without examination. Whether Bruce Lee's approach was validated or Wong Jack Man's dignity was preserved matters less than the recognition that both men were serious practitioners committed to understanding martial arts as deeply as possible, even when that understanding led them to fundamentally different conclusions. The debate they embodied continues today, not just in martial arts circles, but wherever tradition encounters innovation, where established wisdom meets individual analysis, where respect for the past must be balanced against the demands of present effectiveness. The encounter of September 12, 1967, provides no final answers to these tensions, but it offers a reminder that questions worth asking rarely produce conclusions that satisfy everyone involved. In the end, perhaps that is the most valuable lesson from that evening in San Francisco. That serious practitioners can disagree fundamentally about methods while sharing a common commitment to excellence. That tradition and innovation can coexist even when they cannot be easily reconciled, and that the most important encounters sometimes leave more questions than answers in their wake. The hardwood floor of the Junfan Kung Fu Institute has been replaced many times since 1967. The building itself now houses different businesses serving a changed Chinatown community. But the questions raised that evening persist, carried forward by anyone who must choose between preserving what has worked in the past and risking change for the possibility of improvement. Those who were present that night never forgot it, regardless of how they interpreted what they saw. In a world that prefers clear winners and definitive conclusions, they witnessed something more complex. A demonstration that mastery can take different forms, that effectiveness can emerge from contradictory approaches, and that understanding sometimes requires the humility to accept ambiguity rather than demanding certainty. The story endures not because it provides answers, but because it captures the eternal tension between preservation and progress, between honoring tradition and pursuing truth. Whether it happened exactly as described, whether Bruce Lee was as dominant as some remember or Wong Jack Man as dignified as others claim, matters less than what the encounter represents about the courage required to test deeply held beliefs against uncomfortable realities. 43 witnesses, countless retellings, decades of debate, and still no consensus about what actually occurred. Perhaps that is the most honest conclusion possible, that moments of genuine significance resist simple interpretation, that truth is often more complex than the stories we tell about it, and that the most important events sometimes leave us with better questions rather than comfortable answers. Share artifacts. Download. All documentary. Narrative document. MD Project Content Brew V, created by you.